In 1831, French sociologist Alexis de Tocqueville toured the United States, discovering a unique trait among its citizens.
Americans are forever forming associations. As soon as several Americans have conceived a sentiment, they seek each other out and unite. Thenceforth, they are no longer isolated individuals, but a power whose actions serve as an example. Alexis de Tocqueville, 1840.
Tocqueville thought that voluntary associations played a very important role in sustaining high levels of citizen participation, whether it's in the halls of Congress and legislatures or just in local communities. Democracy was a work in progress, if only because in the United States, complete democracy did not exist. The chief participants in the electoral process were propertied white men. It was a contradictory time when democracy was partly there and in many cases not there at all.
The late 19th century was a time of joining. This was a time when there's no real social safety net. So if you get sick and you miss work, there's nothing for you to fall back on.
Organizations come up where there's a need. These early mutual aid societies are just simply ways of pooling resources to provide a little insurance, if you want to call it that.
Many different groups, but all with the same overarching idea, people banding together to improve their society or to protect their society. During and after the Civil War, Tennessee saw increasing urbanization, particularly in Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, and Memphis. You had freedmen pouring into these cities, whites as well, leaving the rural areas to find jobs in factories or in other industrial endeavors. Commercial insurance was not an option for most people during this time. It was either too expensive or the insurance companies would deny coverage due to age or racial discrimination.
As a society became more urbanized, you start to get real explosion of these fraternal societies, mutual aid organizations in small towns and big cities, among immigrant groups. Say these groups arise through necessity to a great extent. You have to do it. If you don't do it, nobody else will. And that's one of the reasons you see them so big among African Americans after the Civil War.
Mutual aid societies would pool their funds, their resources. People would pay small amounts, putting together their pennies and their nickels and dimes, and paying this into a common fund. And then out of this common fund, when you had a death in a member's family, then the society would help to pay for the funeral expenses, or the society would pay something to the family to help them in the event of a death in the family. Groups like the Sons and Daughters of Zion coming together, organizing, and developing a cemetery.
There is a real kind of horror of being a pauper, having a pauper burial and being buried in a graveyard where you might not even have a name on the gravestone. That's their one chance to kind of show, hey, I'm a person that provided for this. That would be kind of first on the agenda. It's a very fatalistic society in a lot of ways. I think people really are familiar with death, much more so than we are. And death is looming, and they've sort of accepted it in a way. So that's one thing they know is going to come, and they prepare for it.
Historian Lee Ann Gardner has logged many hours researching Tennessee's African American benevolent and fraternal lodges. In her spare time, she travels the state, cataloging cemeteries that are, in many cases, forgotten relics from the golden age of mutual aid societies.
It's such an interesting time period in American history when people in local communities got together and said, there's something about my life that needs to be better. Either I need care when I'm sick, or I want to make sure that my children are cared for when I'm dead. People gathered together and created organizations to care for each other, but they also used these organizations to build character and hone leadership skills. I don't think there were a lot of opportunities for that before this time for Americans.